Welcome back to another episode of Software Without Borders. I'm your co-host, Jarret Striner. And with me is my co-host, the CEO of Accelerance, Andy Hilliard. And our guest today is Rich Mironov, a 35-year B2B product veteran and author of The Art of Project Management. He's a voice for the scrappy entrepreneur in all of us. Rich is also the founder of Product Camp, and an in-demand speaker for business executives and technical audiences. Rich has taught at top business schools worldwide, at conferences, and chaired the first Product Manager Product Owner tracks at the annual Agile Conference. He's a sounding board for CPOs, VPs of product around the world. Welcome to the show, Rich.
Thanks for letting me join.
So, Product Camp seems like a fantastic initiative. Can you share some of your best practices for fostering a culture of innovation within a geographically distributed product team?
Sure, and Product Camp goes way back to 2008, and it really builds on some of the unconferences that engineers were doing and developers were doing years before. I think one of the challenges of distributed product teams is that face-to-face is really much more efficient, particularly with the rest of the team. So I'm much more of a fan of having my product managers be co-located with their development teams than necessarily having the product managers co-located with each other. So that because we're going to have this shorthand and the understanding among ourselves about backlogs and priorities and strategies and stuff that we can do pretty efficiently. But I think sitting with your maker team, developers, designers, DevOps, whoever they are, is much more enriching, much more emotionally connecting than doing it over Zoom or some kind of remote.
So if you were to smoke jump into an new organization that was loosely organized, maybe loosely defined, because Accelerance does work with globally distributed software and product development teams, and let's assume that this client has this vision or has some sort of rudimentary makeup along those lines. How would you go about organizing them from the get go? What would you do? What sort of reconnaissance, research, organizational skills, and what would be the sort of the first steps in organizing them?
One of the very first things I look at, and I do these kinds of assessments all the time and sometimes set up the organizations, is I try to tear apart in my mind, very clear distinction between the narrow definition of product owner as it comes out of the Scrum book and the broader definition of product manager or product management as the industry really understands it to be. And the reason that's important, because if you look in the Scrum book, you'll see backlog management and story writing, but you'll never see lots and lots of discovery interviews with real users and real customers to find out what they need.
Sure.
And one of the big issues I run into all the time is what I call product waste, which is distinct from engineering or development waste. Development waste is it was late or it doesn't work or the UI isn't perfect or the workflow is an issue. Product waste is where we build a thing that the world doesn't care about, doesn't want, doesn't pay for, and we spend our 2 million or 5 million bucks building something, and we're left holding an unattractive piece of work, right? It's at the spec level, it's at the discovery level, it's spending dozens or hundreds of hours with the people we intend to use this to really understand if we get their problems right before we go into the coding cycle. So I'm always looking for ways to make sure that the people with product titles, whatever we call them, are the same individuals, along with their design and engineering friends, who are interviewing and understanding users and buyers so that we can actually build something that the world wants instead of just deliver something on time.
So what about the involvement of different participants within that product development value chain? How do they get aligned with this, customer experience, customer feedback?
Sure, and it depends a lot on the makeup of the team, but in general, what I find is a good team's going to have some set of developers, and let's say one product manager and one designer per team. And either the product manager or the designer is going to drive in terms of finding and locating and setting up real interviews with folks and watching them use it. And, if we instrument our applications, looking through the things on any one particular call or one interview or one visit, I'd like to invite a random member of the developer staff just so they can see what's really happening and get a taste for what's going on. And then either the designer or the product manager leads the discussion, because we need just one person to have the microphone or or the podium. But first person, the idea that some product manager is going to write down all the answers, get it all right, see everything that needs to be seen, understand the whole picture, I think is flawed. I really want a developer and a designer listening in real time, asking good questions or having me ask their good questions for them, so that we're covering the skill set, the expertise set of development and design and product economic thinking.
So where does the product owner necessarily sit? And let's also use the example of a distributed team that it might be a software development partner, not necessarily an in-house partner. I've had a lot of discussions, and there's a lot of debate around should it be on the partner side or on the client side? How should they be involved? What is their both education and experience background? Are they a converted project manager? Obviously, probably not. So what do you have to say?
So I think of this first with the failure modes. Okay, so if we have a product person, and I'm going to call them a product owner, if they're part of the outsourced or third-party development team and they're co-located with that team and they're very far away, both geographically and organizationally, from the folks who've made requests, the failure mode here is that we do exactly what our client wants us to do, but our client has it wrong. Right? We've seen this over and over again, where they're spending their millions with us and they're very, very sure that they know what they want. And on average, they're 2/3 off, right? Because they're also not talking with real end users. They're talking with some executive in charge of some group that's going to use this internally, or some very senior buyer at some large company that's never going to touch these products. So if we're in that setting where we've got a product person with a team that's part of the outsourced organization, I'm always looking for somebody with product management experience, and I'll come back to that in a sec, who's on the client side or the customer side or the demand side, who's really doing the work of making sure that we're not just randomly taking some idea out of an executive that he had in the shower this morning and wasting millions and millions of dollars on a thing that's just not quite right. So, when I see the client side here pick some random subject expert or some field person or some implementation team, they generally have zero experience doing this sort of discovery and analysis and humble self-inspection that leads to good products. What I see them doing is paying somebody to build a bunch of stuff, and at the end we discover why it didn't fit or didn't work.
So can you clarify something for me in that regard?
Sure.
Because I didn't quite understand a product owner with product management experience that is holding the client side product manager accountable to be um, delivering a conscientiously correct solution to them. They're holding each other accountable, not just the product owner is not just taking orders or.
Well, I think there's a lot of context there, because a lot of organizations hire outside teams and then tell them what to do instead of having a collaborative discussion.
Yeah.
Right? So if we're in the do what I say model, right, then the person at the other end, whether we call them a product manager or a product owner, is getting whatever they're getting and being responsible for delivery of that according to spec on time. But I think the odds of it being useful in the world are low.
Yeah.
Right? So I see usually something between half and 2/3 product waste there, because the folks who've requested or demanded or are paying for it aren't crisp enough and haven't done enough of their homework, that we have a likelihood that fulfilling all those specs and fulfilling all those dates and requirements actually leads to the business outcome that the client side wanted.
Okay. So what is a good model for managing up all the way from development through product ownership, product management, product marketing, directors, VPs, CPOs, stakeholders? There's a lot of people that are coming out of showers with ideas that try to
Yes.
push ideas down. Like what is a model that prevents that that creates a more conducive, aligned flow of information between these parties?
I think I would say this is a people problem first, right? And so when I parachute into a company, and just for clarity, when we use that phrase, when I use that phrase, it means I'm dropping into an actual company for 3 to 6 months and running their product management team and hiring my replacement behind me. And generally what I find is that the stakeholders, the opinion holders, neither believe there's any issue with what they're demanding, or are very interested in somebody else's opinion that they might not have it exactly right. So the first step is to have a product leader, and I'm going to distinguish that carefully from an individual product manager or product owner who generally has no political juice and no ability to go to VPs and tell them that we're going to rethink something. That we have to have someone at the table who has some similar level of organizational clout and can say, gee, we're going to take a different approach on this project. We're actually going to go out and do validation and discovery and learning and market to check and see if this is useful. And it's going to cost us 2 months, but it may save us $2 to $20 million, right? Somebody who sits at the big kids table and is able to sell the idea, at least on an experimental basis, that we're going to let our product folks do their jobs, because the folks at the bottom of the organization generally don't have any of the leverage to go back to their senior stakeholders and say we're going to slow this project down by 8 weeks to make sure it's useful.
Rich, do you think sometimes when you have product waste, it turns into we just want to get to market first? If we look at the last couple weeks, you had the Rabbit, you had the Humane Pin, and they both basically had a failure to launch. And now with yesterday's Apple announcement of their AI, Apple Intelligence, people are trying to beat the larger companies to the marketplace with their own version of something. Do you think that's really what the precipice of some of these product wastes?
I think at every size company, at every level, there's a focus on delivering on time instead of value, right? And we've let the project and program management dominate here, which is all about delivering on time, right? And when I go back, and I've done a bunch of these, I go back and audit the success of what we built. We said, okay, we spent 2 years and $11 million building this thing because we believed it would lead to 10 to 20,000 customers at $1,000 a month, right? And when we go back and look at what happens, we discover most of the failures aren't actually in the development process at all. It's go to market, it's pricing, it's positioning, it's competitors, it's other things. And so the sort of singular focus on date and delivery for me, well, it makes me sad.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I see 5x and 10x the waste on wrong thing, wrong audience, wrong pricing, wrong packaging, wrong solution, versus we were 8 weeks late or we were a quarter late, right? I think Apple's a pretty thoughtful place, right? And honestly, Apple's never shipped anything that was the first of anything,
Sure.
right? They've always collected great technologies that other companies have spent a year or a decade or 5 decades building and put it into a package that makes sense for real users, that delivers value.
So where's the balance between speed to market and sort of out of the box sort of leadership, and also the concept of perfection is the enemy of good?
Yeah, and obviously it's a gray area here. When we have a team that's more than just developers, when we have UI designers and maybe a research person and a product manager, we have a team that can have good discussions about the trade-off between 1 week earlier and 1 week better, right? And if we're putting beta software out or if we're putting test software out, we should actually be watching the people who use it to find out if we're just 3% off from it working, or 30% off, or nobody knows what we're talking about, right? And so at the team level, at the product level, we want to make thoughtful, nuanced choices and decisions rather than some blanket that says, for the next year, the only thing that matters is either shipping on time or being perfect. Those are both wrong, right? I think context is really important here. And we keep coming back to what is the thing supposed to accomplish, And are our end users able to accomplish that primary task? If they are, then we can ship it pretty soon and we can rough out all the edges later and we can add new features. Does it do the primary thing it's supposed to do? Then we can focus on speed. If our early versions of this product and our early interviews and our early demos are showing that the customers aren't getting it, then we've got to go back and rethink, because we're going to waste the next 2 units of time because our egos say that, or our executives say, we have to finish the thing we promised, whether it's worth useful or not.
Can you can I backtrack a little bit and
Sure,
sort
of
of
course.
you've talked about a lot of different aspects that are typically points of failure in
Yes.
companies and ways they can improve. I'd like to actually touch upon product camp and maybe the agenda. Like what does that agenda look like, and what are the ends in mind that get accomplished through that?
Yeah, I might start somewhere else. So Product Camp was designed as an unconference,
Yeah.
right? And so people showed up and they put up on the wall pieces of paper that had the talks they wanted to give or the topics they wanted to talk about, and we would do dot voting and we would create the agenda in real time.
Who's all attending these?
Oh, so the product folks.
Just the product folks?
Oh, you have some designers there, you'd have a couple engineers, but
That's pretty
mostly
cool.
that was for the tribe itself, right? That was for us as product folks to meet each other, socialize, share our PTSD and our tools and our point of view, and form a community of people who do what we do and maybe understand what we do. There are communities like this for every technical specialty. There's lots of design communities, there's lots of engineering communities around topics. So Product Camp was as much a chance for us to figure out that my problem was the same one everyone else had, as really how to solve it.
Okay.
But when I think about coaching and mentoring somebody up into a product management role, which is something I do every day, there's usually 2 or 3 topic areas. So one is, how do we work with our maker teams, our engineers, designers, and developers to get stuff built? And how do we communicate what it's supposed to accomplish instead of writing specs? Because I don't know if you guys know this, but every developer in the world is smarter than every product manager in the world. And we know this because occasionally we ask them and they tell us, right? So the idea that I'm going to sit in front of Jira and write a ticket and the team is going to do exactly what I told them to do is a source of failure, because I have all these brilliant, smart folks on my team. And if we can just completely, as a group, understand the problem and understand the potential solutions, I'm perfectly happy to be the dumb kid at the table and have one of my engineers or designers give us the good answer and have us all be heroes, right? So first thing for product managers is deep communication and understanding what our maker teams do, and a ton of humility to get out of their way when we don't need to be there. The second piece is all about deep understanding of what our end users are trying to do. Observation, interviews, surveys, on site, right? What's the problem? Because everyone tells us what the solution is, and most of them are wrong because they haven't actually unpacked what's not working. And then the third piece is all around the economics of products. So how do we price it? Who's it for? How are we going to market it? What are the segments? Is it a loss leader? Is it part of the portfolio? Everything that the executive team wants from me, honestly, is all about money and time. So as a product manager, I spend my day being trilingual. Some of the meetings I'm speaking engineering and design and getting stuff built. Some of the meetings I'm talking to end users about benefits and why they care and how it's going to help them. And some of the meetings I'm talking about future money and how I'm going to make the company's stock go up.
Wow.
And so that's 3 rather different pools of skill and talent. And to be a product manager, you have to have all 3. And I've never hired anybody who had all 3 unless they were really good and senior. And so as a coach mentor, I'm trying to figure out which of those 3 I need to shore up next so they can have all 3 linked conversations every day. So we build something and actually finish it. We get it to people who find real value and pay us money, and we satisfy our corporate overlords by bringing in revenue.
Rich, I know you equated product management to parenting. Being a
Yes,
parent
endlessly.
myself, Being a parent myself and seeing how my parenting style has changed from my kids being toddlers all the way up to college, how has the parenting style of, product management changed over the years when now you have, as you said, Jira and SaaS and Agile and, how it was done at the beginning and now with technology, how it's changed. How has that parenting style changed over the years?
I actually think less so change over the years and more so over the lifetime or the life cycle of the product. Okay, so I think there's no 1.0 product that's really good, that really works, that's great, right? Microsoft taught us that everything with a number less than 3.1 isn't very good, right? Um, so when I think about my product, I think about how I may need 18 releases for it to be good enough to go to university and get advanced degrees, right? First couple of releases are pretty bumpy. I better be targeting the people who need it so desperately that they're willing to look, that they're willing to ignore all the warts and the missing things, right? I've got to price it early on so that people adopt it. Otherwise, nobody's going to get there. As my product matures, we're fixing the bugs, we're sanding the edges, we're extending the features, we're making it bigger and stronger, right? When my daughter was 6 and playing little girl soccer, most of the kids couldn't kick the ball. They all chased it in circles. She stood in the corner and honestly just watched the sun and paid no attention, right? Early products have a lot of challenges to them. And so as the parent or the product manager, I have to sort of defend my product through the first couple or 3 releases because everybody's got a reason why I should cancel it or try again. Later on, as we get market share, later on as we get fans and real competitors, we're in the later stages of positioning and pricing and bundling and extending the product to do more stuff. So I expect my product to be robust at, let's say, version 3 or 4, to be killer at version 8, and probably come version 10 we're starting to sunset it and put our energy somewhere else.
Hey, Rich, this interview is, I guess, my question, my thought patterns are somewhat biased because I have a daughter who's a product manager at Checker down in San Francisco,
Very cool.
and it's a very volatile industry,
Yes.
and cycles that we live in, and it frankly sounds like the hardest job in the entire world because being having to juggle so many constituents up and down the value chain and so many attributes of your personality, whether it's a cheerleader, a researcher, a product manager, a project manager, liaison, and
Yep.
managing up and down the value chain seems incredibly difficult. Where do people like that, other than having Rich, on contract to guide them, where do they find the mental, educational, practitioner support to not thrive or manage in that role?
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said. It's a really tough job, and it's one that has all the responsibility and none of the authority. So at most companies, nobody works for the product people. So it's you have to have a lot of charm, you have to have a lot of political skills, you have to have great people understanding. I think of it somewhat more as anthropology than anything else. How does my organization work? How do we make decisions and get things done? Um, I would say that first of all, anybody who comes to me and tells me they think they want to be a product manager, I sell against for the first 20 minutes, right?
Sure.
There are easier jobs that pay more, that are more fun, that let you sleep on the nights and the weekends. Um, a lot of us are much more mission driven. And back to the parenting thing, the place we put our emotion, the place we put our love is into our product and our end users. If you can't come in every day and say, what was it, Tron? I fight for the users, right? Um, if you can't come in every day and find some emotional energy to fight for a better product against all odds and to make users more happy and productive, then this is just a mistake. There's a lot of PTSD. There's a lot of burnout in product jobs. I'm running a class right now for folks who are thinking of how to get promoted up into the product director and VP organization. And many of them honestly don't want to do that because it's just no fun, right?
Mm.
So what I'd say is you need a variety of skills. MBA is good but not required. Engineering degree is good but not required. If you've worked at 3 or 4 other departments in a company and you understand what folks do and what they care about and what motivates them, that's really important. So it's an eclectic bunch, but it tends to be a little introverted, but with the ability to be extroverted when we need to,
Sure.
um, to deeply empathize with people and then not give them most of what they want because that's the job. To separate the requester from the request because that's a really good idea. I love what you've suggested, and we're never going to do it before 2074, right?
So, Rich, can I also switch this
Sure.
to how has the role evolved over the last, let's say, 10 years, where
Oh, sure.
let's say you went from domestic co-location of all stakeholders and
Right.
and developers to domestic co-location and global co-location to distributed and globally distributed teams. Now
Yeah.
everyone's distributed. Like what additional burden or skill sets does a product
Yeah.
manager need to have?
So I think working remotely is harder for product folks than working locally. If their teams and working with my team locally is the easiest, best, most efficient model for me as an individual product manager. But as you said, that isn't what the world looks like anymore.
Yeah.
So we need to plan for a lot of travel for our product folks, both to visit customers and to be with their teams. There needs to be a really strong emotional tie and personal tie between the product folks and their teams. I am always recommending that we go there and then we take everybody out to dinner for a couple of nights
Yeah.
because that's how we build trust and camaraderie. And there's a lot of shuttle diplomacy here. It means going to where the executives are to be in the meetings with the execs because they like to do it face to face. It means, visiting most of the customers remotely or some kind of remote sensing and diagnostics. But if I haven't sat down with the folks who are building my stuff, the real engineers and the real designers and the real DevOps folks, I think that's a problem.
Yeah.
So we can put the product people where the teams are, and then we can plan for them to be on the road, 1 week a month, or we can put the product folks where the executives are and have them plan to be on the road 1 week a month, right? Or supplementing the remote.
The breaking bread piece, Rich, really speaks to me. I was in Argentina back in November, and we sat down with some partners and had dinner and played paddle. And I felt that experience, really made an enhancement to just going in and talking to them.
You
'Cause
bet.
anybody, I mean, going in and talking sometimes it's just like, speaking in a Zoom. You're in the same room, but you're not in the same
Yeah,
room. And,
absolutely.
and I feel like that is just a much better way to, one, you get to know the people, you understand who they are, where they come from, and that trust factor really kind of starts to grow.
Absolutely, and there's a real tendency if I'm at headquarters and we've hired a bunch of teams far away, partly because they're great teams and partly because they're lower cost, right? The lower cost tends to be the thing people remember, and so we have all kinds of slurs and bad thoughts about these third-class citizens who we don't respect because we never meet them, right?
Mhm.
And then you go, and it turns out they're smart and they're hardworking and they care about their users and they want to do the best work and maybe they're short of tools or communications from headquarters, but um, gosh, building tech is such an emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
This isn't just about typing and pushing buttons, right? So if I as a product leader or a team lead or a product manager, can build those conversations and relationships, then when I have some piece of news like we're going to have to delay something or the feature didn't work or we got it wrong, we've built the trust between me and my team that we can talk, right? If we're just faces on a screen, I worry that I'm minimizing their talent, I'm minimizing my understanding of their local culture and what they're good at, right? That I'm writing them down in a way that's really inappropriate or inexcusable.
Yeah. Hey, Rich, I know we're running somewhat short on time. I just
Sure.
maybe like two other questions. I had one
Go.
question, and that is, it seems like we're sort of in the midst of this change of globalization, required globalization because of the access to hyper specialized talent or
Hmm.
cost efficiency. So
Right.
we have to figure out how to evolve the role of product manager in that new reality. At the same time, it seems like we're also on the hype cycle of yet another big wave of
Right.
change. So, I guess we're going to have to deal with absorbing the changes of globalization while at the same time preparing for or starting to be proactive about this next wave. So, can you describe to me
Sure.
maybe the next wave and what's to come of it?
And you're thinking of AI as the next
Yeah,
wave?
primarily, I guess.
Okay, sure. So let's separate the things. I'm a strong believer in whole teams, right? So I would rather put product folks where their teams are, right? But sometimes that's hard. Having a sort of atomic team where we have 8 folks in 8 countries and 8 time zones, I think is just ineffective, right? But the AI thing that I've seen, and I've done some writing about this. I see actually two completely different trends for AI. So one of them is that currently investors have figured out that if your company announces a bunch of AI things, whether they work or not, whether they exist or not, whether they add any value to users or not, your stock goes up, or your IPO is better, or your acquisition value is higher. So I'm seeing a whole wave of execs who honestly don't care about tech, who are insisting that in the next 90 days we add some AI feature to our product and announce it, even if it doesn't work, right? Especially if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The other side of that is there's real motion. I've been working in AI since the 70s, so it's not new for me, right? But there's finally some real motion where some of the AI stuff is going to add real value. And as a product person, I start there, which is what problems do my customers have, my users have, that various and different AI tools can help with? Do they need large language models? That's fine as long as we don't actually care if the answers are always right, right? Do we need machine learning because we're looking at x-rays of patients and we're trying to find tumors, right? Do we need, there's lots of flavors here. So start with the problems and then move to the tools and ask the question of, can we do it? Should we do it? Is it going to add value? Do we have the right data, the right scientists, right? Can we make this work? Because that's where the long-term value is going to be. Most of those projects are going to fail. Like every other product and project, we're going to see 80, 90% failure modes here. But, some of them are going to create billions of dollars worth of value, right?
Yeah.
I think most of the AI firms right now are overvalued by a factor of 100, but that's not my call,
Yeah.
right? So I'm always trying to separate the window dressing, the AI washing of we need an announcement next Tuesday and we don't care what it is, from
Sure.
here's some good thought about how this particular flavor of AI might or might not improve the effectiveness, efficiency, or value to our real paying users of what we do.
Wow.
Well, thank you, Rich. That was really insightful, and I think for myself and Andy, we gained a lot of knowledge today.
Good, thanks.
So for another episode of Software Without Borders, I'm Jarret Striner, along with my co-host Andy Hilliard. Thank you, Rich, for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks, Rich.